What they don't teach you about compounding in school is that it's so much less about math and much more about behavior. Most people hear the word compounding and they immediately think of charts that slope upward or a formula that shows how money grows over time. That's the part that they teach you. What doesn't get taught is how easy it is to interrupt that compounding and how often people do it without realizing it. If you've ever wondered why long-term investing sounds simple but feels hard in practice, this is why. So in this video, I want to walk you through three things. First, what compounding actually looks like in the real world, not just in a textbook. Second, why taking money out at the wrong time quietly destroys your long-term results. And third, why discipline over decades matters more than almost any short-term decision you'll ever make. To understand this, we have to slow down and talk about how compounding really works in stocks. On paper, compounding looks clean. You invest money, it earns a return, that return earns a return, and over enough time, this growth accelerates. The formula assumes one thing that almost never holds in real life, that nothing interferes with this process of compounding. In reality, compounding only works if the capital stays in this system. The moment you interrupt it, even briefly, you reset more progress than most people realize. So think of compounding like a building, where there's a structure and each layer depends on the layers below it. Early on, progress feels slow, almost painfully slow. The structure's small and each new layer just doesn't look that impressive. This is where most people lose interest because the effort feels so much bigger than the reward. But over time, that structure gets taller and taller and taller, and each new layer adds more than the one before it. Not because you're doing anything different, but because there's more underneath it that's supporting that growth. And that's the entire advantage of compounding. The problem is that most people never let the structure get tall enough. They pull the money out early because gains feel real for the first time. Or they get really nervous during a downturn and they convince themselves they're gonna be prudent. Or they see a different opportunity and decide to just move things around because this exciting woman in the red dress walked by. Each of these decisions feels small in the moment. None of them feel like you're sabotaging, but mathematically, you are sabotaging. When you take money out of the compounding system, you're not just removing that principal, you're removing every future layer that the money would have supported. The loss isn't linear, it's exponential, and it's invisible because it shows up years down the road, not immediately. That's why long-term charts are so misleading when people look at them casually. They show what happens if you stay invested, not what actually happens when real humans make real decisions under pressure. Most investors don't fail because they chose bad assets. They fail because they interrupt the good ones, because they think it's done so well, it's easy to pull it out. There's a common belief that being active and responsive is smart, and staying still is passive or lazy. In markets, it's often the opposite. The biggest enemy of compounding is the urge to do something. Warren Buffett talks about this all the time. Short-term decision-making feels responsible because it gives you a sense of control. You're responding to news, to risk, you're being engaged, but markets don't reward activity. What they reward is patience aligned with time and proper choices. The hardest part of compounding is that the most important period is the one where nothing exciting seems to be happening. Early on, your returns feel modest. Volatility feels scary because there isn't much accumulated gain to cushion it. And this is exactly when people convince themselves that pulling money out just for now or for another asset or another investment makes more sense. What they don't see is that the later years are where most of the growth actually happens. Compounding is heavily backloaded. The dramatic results come from allowing it to stack on top of time. So don't be worried if the short term you don't feel like anything's happening. It's happening under the surface, you just haven't reached it yet. So when you remove that capital, you experience that hard part I just talked about without earning any of the benefit in the future. This is where discipline comes in, and discipline here doesn't mean white knuckling through every downturn. It means deciding in advance what the money's for and what time frame it's meant to operate on. Money that's invested for long-term growth shouldn't be evaluated with short-term emotions. This mismatch is what creates bad decisions. If you need the money soon, it shouldn't be exposed to long-term volatility. If you don't need it soon, put it away and forget it. And volatility is just part of the price you pay for the long-term gain that is compounding. A lot of people intellectually understand this, but emotionally they treat every dollar the same. They don't separate short-term needs from long-term capital, so every market movement feels personal. Long-term discipline is about boundaries. It's about knowing which money is allowed to fluctuate, which money isn't. It's separating out what's for long-term, set it and forget it, and what are you trying to earn in the short term? It takes planning. But once that line's clear, the pressure to interfere drops significantly. Another thing that doesn't get taught is how damaging partial withdrawals can be. People assume that as long as most of the money is invested, they're still compounding. Technically that's true, but practically it's very misleading. Compounding is most powerful when the base keeps growing uninterrupted because you're building on top of layers, you're not chipping away and creating small cracks. Those small repeated withdrawals, it flattens the curve far more than people expect. You didn't notice it in year 5, you notice it in year 20. Sometimes you don't notice at all the damage that you've done. This is why consistency matters far more than cleverness, why planning out and showing yourself what 10, 15, 20 years of compounding looks like before you ever get there. You don't need perfect timing, you don't need the best perfectly timed stock picks. You need time, patience, and the ability to not interrupt yourself when you've invested it in stable assets with good businesses. There are reasonable disagreements here. Some people are going to argue that taking profit along the way reduces risk, and in certain contexts, that's absolutely true. But that's a different objective. That's managing income or volatility, not maximizing your compounding. The mistake is when you mix goals. If your goal is long-term growth, decisions should be evaluated based on their impact over decades, not months. Draw it out, map it out, look at it frequently. But if your goal is income or stability, then compounding isn't the primary engine anymore. You just have to know which way you're trying to play or which buckets of money is doing which. Problems start when people say they want long-term growth, but they behave as if they're managing a short-term portfolio. So how does this apply to you? First question isn't what you're invested in, it's what is this bucket of money meant to do? Is it there to fund something in the next few years, the next couple of months, or is it there to grow quietly over a long period of time? It's why I like to set money aside in an account that's hard to get into so that it's set it and forget it and let it grow forever. I honestly just forget it's there. So if it's this ladder of growth, then the most important habit isn't checking performance. It's kind of ignoring performance and avoiding unnecessary decisions with that bucket of money. The fewer times you feel the need to intervene, the better the odds that compounding is actually going to work in your favor. You also need to be very honest about your own temperament. If volatility makes you anxious, then your strategy needs to account for that. Set it someplace that's hard to access or you're not gonna look at because it's difficult to get to. So don't avoid the market entirely, but change the exposure so that you can stay consistent and it doesn't bother you as much. Compounding doesn't reward bravado, it rewards sustainability. Over long time horizons, the fundamentals really don't change. What matters is time. Staying invested matters, responsibility matters. Tools, platforms, and strategies, they evolve. But none of them replace patience and discipline when that is the goal. The uncomfortable truth is that compounding favors people who are willing to be bored and occasionally uncomfortable for a very long time. This is not something that school teaches well because it doesn't fit neatly into a test question. Good luck even getting in a question at all. But in real life, the difference between seeing compounding on a chart and actually benefiting from it is just that. The takeaway is simple, even if it's not easy. Compounding works best when you stop trying to improve it and you just focus on not breaking it. I will say it again, set it and forget it. If this helped clarify how compounding works, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.